Look at me, Maya. You think you're walking away from this with nothing. Garrett's voice wasn't a shout. It was worse. It was that low, controlled hiss he used when he knew he had you cornered. The one that always made the tiny hairs on my neck stand up, even here, in the middle of Terminal C, surrounded by hundreds of strangers. 3 security lines over, the scent of expensive coffee and duty-free perfume was violently disrupted by the heavy musk of Garrett's cologne. I squeezed my eyes shut for a second, fighting the urge to tell him to lower his voice. "I have my ticket, Garrett. We're done. Just give me my luggage tag and let me go." My heart wasn't just pounding. It felt like a trapped bird beating itself against my ribs, desperate for escape. The final call for my flight to Seattle, my new job, my new life, my chance to finally be me, was already echoing, a cold, automated woman's voice sealing my fate. Garrett, always the picture of sleek, tailored success, leaned in, his smile cold enough to freeze the humidity of the crowded hall. "Oh, honey, you're not starting over without my permission, and you certainly aren't starting over with my money." He didn't hit me, not with his hand, not this time. He just raised his voice the barest fraction, enough for the people around us, the families, the business travelers, the honeymooners, to stop scrolling and start starring. The humiliation was a physical weight, heavier than any suitcase. "You really thought you could ghost me, after everything I did, the career I gave you, the life you were supposed to have?" His subtext was screaming, "You owe me. Your existence is my property." I reached for the small, worn leather shoulder bag I'd clutched under my arm, the one with my passport, my new work visa, the $500 in emergency cash. That was my escape route, my only lifeline. Before I could even touch the zipper, Garrett's hand, the one that wore the 7-figure watch, was already there. A quick, practiced yank, and the strap snapped with a noise that sounded pathetic and final. The bag, my future, flew across the highly polished floor. "Whoops," Garrett said, his eyes glittering with triumph, the perfect expression of an innocent mistake. "Butterfingers." A collective gasp, much louder this time, rippled through the crowd. I stood frozen, watching my life scatter, passport on the floor, some loose papers fluttering near the feet of a man standing perfectly still, impeccably dressed in a dark suit. The realization hit me like a shockwave. Without that bag, without the papers and the money, I wasn't just delaying my flight. I was stuck. I was trapped, right back where I started. "You disgusting narcissist." The words tore out of me, fueled by pure, blinding panic. I took a wild, desperate step toward the bag. That's when Garrett reacted. Not the slap I was braced for, but a cold, calculated shove that sent me stumbling backward. My heel caught on a misplaced cart, and I felt myself falling, the hard reality of the airport floor rushing up to meet me. A strong, immediate hand shot out, catching my elbow and steadying me with impossible precision. I didn't fall. I steadied myself, the dizzying scent of cedarwood and Italian leather overwhelming the noise of the airport. I looked up. The man was a silhouette against the harsh terminal lights, tall, broad. His suit was dark, maybe charcoal, the tailoring sharp enough to cut glass, but it was his face that made my breath hitch. Chiseled, unreadable, framed by dark hair that looked expensive. He wasn't looking at me. His eyes, a shade darker than the night sky, were locked entirely on Garrett. "I believe," the stranger said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble that cut through the airport chatter like a knife. "The lady already made her departure clear." His accent was a faint, sophisticated melody of the old world, utterly at odds with the gutter trash drama he just stepped into. Garrett, always a bully but never a fighter, bristled. "Stay out of it, pal. This is a private matter. This is my fiancé." The stranger's lips curved into a smile that promised absolute ruin. He took one step closer, an action that somehow felt like the closing of a vault. "It stopped being a private matter the moment she started trying to escape you," the stranger replied. He didn't wait for Garrett's next move. He simply reached out and placed his hand, a large, powerful hand, the kind that held everything steady on the wrist that Garrett was using to point. And then he squeezed. Not a dramatic bone-crushing squeeze, but a subtle application of pressure that made Garrett's face go instantly white, his arrogant posture dissolving into a wince of pure, agonizing pain. "Now," the stranger continued, his gaze never leaving Garrett, "you have two options. You apologize, pick up her belongings, and disappear. Or," he tightened the grip, just a hair, and the sound of Garrett's sharp intake of breath was sickening, "you find out exactly what happens to men who put their hands on what doesn't belong to them." This wasn't a rescue. This was the arrival of a predator, and for the first time in months I felt not fear but a terrifying, exhilarating flicker of hope. He wasn't just saving me, he was demanding the impossible. He was making my problem his, and he hadn't even looked back at me yet. The silence that followed the stranger's threat was total. All the airport noise, the rolling suitcases, the distant announcements, the buzz of conversations seemed to vanish. All I could hear was Garrett's ragged breathing and the furious, silent command radiating from the man gripping his wrist. Garrett was used to being the threat, the most powerful person in the room. Seeing that cold, confident superiority drain from his face was a revelation. It wasn't just physical pain. It was the shock of meeting a force that didn't care about his money, his connections, or his reputation. "You don't understand," Garrett choked out, the pain clearly making his voice unsteady. "This is my problem. She stole from me." The stranger's eyes finally flicked toward me, a single, sharp appraisal that took in my trembling hands, my flushed face, and the desperate mess of my scattered belongings. Then he looked back at Garrett, and any semblance of neutral calmness was gone. There was something dark, almost predatory in his gaze. "Lies often start with a desperate claim of ownership," he murmured, his voice maintaining that low, dangerous register. "Let's assume for a moment that she owes you something. It still doesn't give you the right to put your hands on her, or to steal what little agency she has left." He gave a slight twist of his wrist, and Garrett let out a small, humiliating sound. "I'm Julian," the stranger stated, and the name, like everything else about him, sounded important. "Julian Rossi, and I'm making this my business now." The name seemed to register with a couple of the onlookers, causing a few more gasps and a sudden fumbling for cell phones. That was my first real clue. This man wasn't just wealthy, he was known. Julian released Garrett's wrist abruptly. Garrett stumbled back 3 steps, immediately cradling his arm and looking utterly defeated. The expensive watch seemed cheapened by the indignity of his retreat. "Get out of here, Garrett," I heard myself say, the strength in my voice surprising even me. "I'm not coming back, you're done." Garrett shot me a look of pure, venomous hatred. "You'll regret this, Maya. You have no idea who you just tied yourself to. He won't save you from me forever." "He doesn't have to," Julian interjected, cutting off Garrett's empty threat. Julian didn't shout. He didn't even raise his voice. He simply delivered a line that froze the blood in my veins, not because of the threat, but because of the terrifying promise it held. "You touch her, Garrett, you touch everything I own," Julian said, his eyes drilling into my ex-fiancé. "And trust me, Garrett, you can't afford to touch Julian Rossi's property. Are we clear?" Garrett, beaten and pale, simply nodded, shoving his way past the gawking travelers and disappearing through a set of revolving doors. The speed of his retreat was pure, visceral satisfaction. The adrenaline that had been keeping me rigid instantly drained away, leaving my legs feeling like water. I sank down to my knees, not caring about the public spectacle, just needing to be closer to the small pile of my future scattered on the floor. My hands shook as I reached for my passport. Julian moved with an economy of motion that was almost unnerving. He knelt beside me, his presence radiating warmth and a profound, solid masculinity. He didn't hover, he simply was there. His large hands, those same hands that had just broken Garrett's spirit, now gently picked up my scattered papers and placed them back in the torn leather bag. "Are you hurt, Maya?" His voice had completely transformed, stripped of menace, replaced by a low, concerned timbre that felt intensely private, even in this public space. Up close, I could see the flecks of gold in his deep brown eyes and the sheer, overwhelming intensity of his focus. I shook my head, my throat too tight to speak. I was fine physically, but emotionally I was a wreck. "My ticket, my flight is gone," I whispered, the crushing reality setting in. I had escaped Garrett, but I was now stranded, penniless, and professionally ruined. Julian didn't offer sympathy. He offered a solution. "The flight doesn't matter. What matters is that you are safe and that we rectify the rest of this mess." He handed me the repaired bag. "Now, I am supposed to be on a private jet to Geneva, but that can wait. I insist you let me buy you dinner and perhaps discuss how we retrieve the belongings and funds Garrett seems to have relieved you of." The words should have triggered every alarm bell. A mysterious, powerful man who had just used veiled threats of violence, canceling a private jet for a woman he'd just met, and now offering to finance my next steps. It was insane. But then I thought of Garrett's triumphant sneer, the way he stole my lifeline, and the sheer, desolate terror of being trapped in this city with nothing. I needed leverage. I needed power. And Julian Rossi, standing beside me in a suit that cost more than my apartment, was the very definition of it. I looked up at him, my resolve steeling. "I need my passport to leave the country and my money to live. That's why I was running." "I know," he said, meeting my gaze. "And running is not winning, Maya, it's delaying. Let me show you how to win." It wasn't a proposal for a date. It was a proposition for an alliance. My heart pounded, but this time it was with a fearful excitement. "Okay, Julian Rossi," I said, rising to my feet. "One dinner, let's talk about winning." He smiled, a genuine, heartbreakingly attractive smile that reached his dark eyes. It was the moment I stopped being a victim and became a player in a game I didn't yet understand. The transition from the chaos of Terminal C to the back seat of a sleek, armored black sedan was jarring. It was like stepping from a noisy, fluorescent-lit diner into the hushed, deep-carpeted hallway of an exclusive club. The tinted windows were absolute. The city outside became a beautiful, harmless blur. Julian sat beside me, maintaining a distance that was both respectful and intensely frustrating. The scent of cedar and refined leather filled the air. He hadn't touched me since the airport, but I was acutely aware of the heat radiating off his body. In the front were two men. One was driving, his hands competent and silent on the wheel. The other, the one I focused on, was lean, severe-looking, and had an alertness that screamed former military. He was Max, Julian's right-hand man, and he hated my presence. As Julian took a call, speaking quietly in fluent, rapid Italian, Max glanced in the rearview mirror. His eyes, cold and assessing, met mine. This wasn't a casual employee. This was a professional whose world I had just violated. He spoke, his voice dry and low, startling me. "You know how to swim, Ms. Chen." I blinked, confused. "Excuse me." "Just checking," Max continued, not breaking eye contact. "The boss doesn't often bring unknowns into the vehicle. It complicates things, and things that complicate his business often end up at the bottom of a river." Julian ended his call and turned to Max, a slight hardening around his jaw. "Max, enough." "Respectfully, sir," Max replied, not taking his eyes off the road ahead. "The woman was running away from trouble. We tend not to invite trouble into the car, sir, especially not today." Max's open, verbal suspicion was the most real thing that had happened since Julian intervened. It was the truth of Julian's world, dangerous, vigilant, and unforgiving. "Max is right, Maya," Julian said, his eyes softening as he looked at me, an unspoken apology in the gesture. "My world isn't simple. It's full of complications and people who believe they have a right to judge who belongs and who doesn't." I swallowed, the initial exhilaration of being rescued giving way to a cold, hard knot of fear. But I remembered the look in Garrett's eyes as he stole my bag. Fear was no longer my default. I've spent the last 2 years with a man who thought he owned me, who made me feel crazy for questioning his lies. I've been running from predictable toxicity, I told Julian, meeting his gaze head-on. Your world might be dangerous, but at least it's an honest kind of danger, and I still need my passport back. So tell Max I'm worth the complication. Julian's smile returned, wider this time, filled with a spark of approval. There you have it, Max. She has spirit, and I'll take spirit over predictability any day. The car pulled up to a discreet, unmarked building. It didn't look like a restaurant. It looked like a bank or a private foundation. Julian escorted me inside, and the deference shown by the staff was immediate and profound. We were led to a private dining room, all dark wood and subtle, powerful art. Over a glass of wine, a vintage that smelled like the entire contents of my stolen savings, I decided to confront the elephant in the room. Garrett called you a pal, a random stranger, but your men call you sir, and Max implied that getting into your car is a matter of life and death. What do you import, Julian? Explosives. He laughed, a rich, genuine sound that momentarily dispelled the tension. I import and export many things, Maya. Art, fine wine, specialized assets. And sometimes I import order into situations that desperately lack it. He paused, his expression turning serious. I won't lie to you. My family is old. My business is extensive. And yes, my methods of maintaining order are not always conventional. That's the only transparency I can offer you tonight. And that's the danger Max was warning me about. Precisely. So tell me about your danger, Julian countered, deftly turning the attention back to me. Tell me about Garrett Vance. Tell me what he stole from you that can't be put back in that torn bag. And in the warm, private bubble of that room, with the city lights twinkling below, I found myself talking. I told him about the years of subtle control, the financial manipulation, the emotional destruction that had felt quieter but far more devastating than the public slap I'd escaped. The tears finally came, not of sadness, but of pure, relieved release. I was finally, truly, confessing the nightmare to a stranger who seemed to understand the difference between being saved and being seen. The truth, once spilled, was unexpectedly cleansing. I didn't hold back. I told Julian how Garrett, a celebrated partner at his firm, used his reputation as a shield while dismantling mine piece by piece. He'd convinced me my analytical job was beneath me, gently nudging me into an assistant role at his office so he could monitor every single call and email. The gaslighting, the quiet insistence that my anxieties were irrational, the subtle draining of my savings account for joint investments that only benefited him. It all poured out. Julian listened. He didn't interrupt with advice or platitudes. He just watched me, his expression a mixture of profound sorrow and quiet fury. When I finally finished, exhausted and ashamed, he reached across the table and placed his hand over mine. It was a gesture of solidarity, not romance. I started to believe him, I whispered, looking down at our joined hands. I truly thought I was too emotional, too crazy, too inept to survive without him. That's why the slap didn't even shock me. I felt like I deserved it. Julian's grip tightened, his thumb stroking my knuckles slowly. Maya, he said, his voice dropping to a low, intense level. That is the real crime. When a man takes a woman's strength and convinces her it was never there. You never deserved that. He pulled his hand back, seemingly wrestling with an internal debate. Then he leaned forward, sharing a secret with the city below and the darkness of the room. I told you I understand order, he began. I also understand chaos, the kind that rips families apart. I was much younger, maybe 10. My older sister, Sophia, beautiful, brilliant, a light in our world, married a man my family didn't approve of. Not for business reasons, but because we saw the darkness in him. He was a man like Garrett, charming in public, a monster behind closed doors. He paused, collecting the memory. The raw pain in his eyes was palpable. I finally saw the fissure in his impenetrable armor. She stayed, Maya. She believed the shame was her burden. It wasn't physical violence, not until the very end. It was the slow, psychological poison. By the time my brother and I realized how deeply she was drowning, it was too late. She never recovered. She lost herself completely. We couldn't save her. He inhaled sharply. When I saw that look of sheer, defeated terror in your eyes at the airport, it wasn't just a stranger I saw. It was Sophia. And I swore then and there that I would never stand by and watch a man break a woman like that again. Never. That's my only apology for interfering today. The weight of his confession was immense. It explained his immediate, visceral fury, the almost religious zeal with which he protected me. His protection wasn't just a powerful man flexing his muscles. It was a deeply personal, sacred vow to a lost sister. "So this isn't just about me," I whispered. "No," Julian confirmed. "This is about redemption, for both of us. You need to start over, and I need to prove that true power is used to heal, not to harm." The atmosphere shifted completely. We weren't just two people attracted to each other. We were two survivors, bound by a shared understanding of psychological warfare and the quest for justice. The romance suddenly felt earned, weighted with the seriousness of his past. "Thank you for telling me, Julian," I said softly. "We have a long night ahead, Maya Chen," he replied, a challenge in his eyes. "You came seeking refuge. I'm offering you an alliance. Now let's talk strategy. Tell me everything Garrett stole down to the last penny, because when morning comes, we start winning." That night, Julian didn't press me to stay in his guest room. He had Max arrange for a luxury hotel suite, safe, protected, and fully paid for, with a clear instruction. No one was to know where I was, and Max was to be stationed outside my door. He didn't want my body, he wanted my trust. And for the first time in 2 years, I slept soundly, knowing I was protected by a man who had more to lose than just his reputation. I was protected by a vow of vengeance. The next morning, I was back in Julian's penthouse, a sanctuary of polished steel, glass, and undeniable power overlooking the waking city. We were ostensibly working. Julian's legal team, already mobilized, was putting together the financial and psychological evidence against Garrett based on the details I provided. But I felt less like a client and more like a carefully assessed threat. Max's suspicious gaze followed me everywhere. Around mid-morning, while I was documenting the fraudulent use of my credit cards, the room's atmosphere changed. Julian's private line rang, the one only used for the most important and often most dangerous business. He took the call in the adjoining office, but the soundproofing wasn't quite enough to muffle the sheer intensity of his voice. He wasn't speaking Italian now. It was a cold, sharp English, laced with undeniable command. The words, although fragmented, created a terrifying picture. "I don't care about the asset loss, only the breach. You let them get that close. This is not a discussion, Matteo. We secure the borders now. If there is a spillover, your contract is void, and the entire territory answers to me. Do you understand? I will burn the entire chain to protect the integrity of the line." He slammed the phone down, not in anger, but in the finality of a severe judgment. He walked back into the living area, his tailored shirt slightly rumpled, his jaw set hard. He looked less like a romantic hero and more like a general who had just ordered a devastating counterattack. "Everything all right?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The ease with which he talked about burning a chain was deeply unsettling. Julian ran a hand through his dark hair, a rare sign of stress. "It is now a minor incursion. Someone underestimated the reach of our operation. It's handled." He looked at me, his eyes guarded, waiting for my reaction. This was the moment of truth. "You said your business was about order," I stated slowly. "That sounds like a declaration of war. That sounds like a lot more than importing specialized assets." Julian walked to the massive window, his back to me. "It is. My family's business is about power, the kind of power that keeps our interests and the people connected to them safe. That breach, It wasn't just a threat to my finances. It was a test of authority. I failed that test once with Sophia. I won't again. He turned back to face me, and I felt the weight of the moment pressing down. This is my world, Maya. It's not the safe, predictable white-collar hell you lived in. This is real consequence, real danger. If you stay, you are protected with a kind of ferocity you can't imagine. But you also become visible. You become connected to the risks. This is the truth Max warned you about. He didn't offer me an escape route back to Chicago. He offered me a final choice between two kinds of danger: the predictable, soul-crushing control of Garrett's world, or the unpredictable, high-stakes exposure of Julian's. I need to be absolutely certain of your choice, Maya, he stressed. Not because I need a partner, but because I need a woman who knows what she's walking into. I thought about the silence in my life with Garrett, the silence that enabled his abuse. I thought about the sheer volume of Julian's power, and how, in the last 24 hours, he'd restored more of my self-worth than a year of therapy ever could. I'm not afraid of the danger, Julian, I said, rising and walking toward him, my steps firm and measured. I'm afraid of being helpless. Garrett took my life, my self-respect, and my money. I want them back. I want justice. And if your world is the only one powerful enough to deliver it, then I choose the visibility. I choose the consequence. I stopped right in front of him, close enough to smell the faint scent of danger and expensive cologne. I don't want to run anymore. I want to win. But I have one condition for this alliance. Julian's eyes narrowed slightly, a hint of respect replacing the tension. Name it. You can protect me from the outside world, but you cannot try to control my internal life. My decisions, my career, my choices, they are mine alone. That is the non-negotiable price of my trust, Julian. A slow, profound smile spread across his face. It was the smile of a man who had just met his match. Done, Maya Chen, he said, taking my hand and bringing it to his lips. Welcome to the game. Now let's go to the country estate and dismantle Garrett Vance's life, starting with that stolen passport. Country estate wasn't a house. It was a fortress disguised as a resort. Tucked deep into the rolling hills upstate, it felt like a silent, powerful observer of the world. It was the kind of place where a person could truly disappear, or, in my case, truly reappear. The journey itself was the fastest kind of courtship. Julian was attentive, funny, and surprisingly knowledgeable about everything from ancient history to data analysis, a way of showing he respected my career. The electricity between us was almost painful, sparking every time our hands brushed over the map, or when his low laugh filled the quiet car. But we weren't there for a honeymoon. We were there for strategy. Garrett operates on reputation, Julian explained, setting up a secure video call with his chief legal counsel, a woman named Clara who had the demeanor of a high-powered missile. He's a bully, but he's also a coward who fears public exposure and professional ruin. We won't just file a restraining order. We're going to hit his soft spots, his finances, and his professional license. Julian had Max retrieve all the original financial documents Garrett had manipulated me into signing. Clara was already compiling the evidence: the falsified expense reports, the quiet transfers from my savings, the pattern of psychological abuse verified by my journals. The speed and precision of Julian's organization were intoxicating. This was the true moment of value conversion for the story. It was no longer about a damsel rescued by a knight. It was about a powerful man using his resources to facilitate justice for a victim of financial and domestic abuse. Here is what Garrett fears most, Maya, Clara said on the screen. He convinced the firm he was getting married to secure his upcoming promotion. If his partners find out, he not only lost you, but that he has a pending charge for theft and domestic battery. Even if it's just a report, it will collapse his entire partnership review. I felt a surge of cold satisfaction. This wasn't about revenge, it was about consequences. What about my passport and the money he took? I asked. Julian leaned forward. Max already paid a visit to Garrett's city apartment. He didn't elaborate on how Max got in, and I didn't ask. Max found your bag all intact. It's already been couriered here. The money is recovered. My hands shook as I unzipped the leather bag. My passport, my visa, my emergency cash, my freedom were all there. I looked at Julian, overwhelmed. You did this in less than 48 hours. Power is efficiency, Maya, Julian said, his eyes filled with a pride that wasn't arrogant but purely possessive. Now we write the statement. We don't ask for mercy. We demand every penny back, a non-disclosure agreement protecting your privacy, and a formal agreement that he will never contact you or come within 5 miles of your new workplace. Later that evening, as the sun set over the rolling hills, Julian and I stood on the terrace. He opened up more about his business, the complex, almost royal structure of his family's enterprise, the expectations of loyalty, the constant threat of rivals. He wasn't apologetic, he was informing me of the terms. The greatest risk isn't from the outside world, Julian said, taking my hand and tracing a line across my palm. It's the loss of self. You found yours again today by fighting back. Are you willing to fight for it every day with me in this life? I looked at the woman who had spent the day dictating terms of justice to a high-powered law firm, the woman who was no longer afraid of a man's shadow. I tried quiet and predictable, I repeated, remembering the line from the original script, now charged with new meaning. It nearly destroyed my identity. Julian, 3 days ago I was trapped. You showed me that I didn't have to be a victim, even in the biggest, most dangerous games. If this life means I get to keep this version of myself, then yes, I'll take the risk. That night, for the first time, our kiss was inevitable. It wasn't the spontaneous passion of the original script. It was a deeply committed promise forged in shared strategy, respect, and the sweet taste of justice. The intensity of our connection was undeniable, accelerating past all logic. The emotional intimacy forged over shared trauma and a successful campaign for justice was a far stronger bond than any conventional courtship. On our 5th evening at the estate, Julian took me to the highest point of the terrace, the stars scattered across the vast night sky like diamonds. He was impossibly handsome, even more so when his powerful energy was focused entirely on me. Maya, he said, holding a small velvet box, his voice slightly rough with emotion. I know this is insane. I know it defies every logical calculation you and I have ever made. But every decision I've made since I saw you standing up to that bastard has been about clearing the path for this. He opened the box. The ring wasn't ostentatious. It was a single, flawless emerald-cut diamond, elegant and timeless, a statement of reserved power. I'm not asking you to forget your past or forget your journey to Seattle, he said. I'm asking you to integrate it. I want to build a life where you are my equal, my conscience, and my anchor. Say you will marry me, not when I choose, but when you are ready to walk down that aisle as a partner, not a prize. I felt the tears well up, not tears of a damsel receiving a rescue, but tears of a woman whose choices were finally being respected. Yes, Julian, I whispered, reaching out to touch his face. Yes, I will marry you, but I will not do it until I have secured the job in Seattle, even if I only work there for 6 months. I need to prove to myself that I can build a career and thrive entirely on my own merit. That is my term of engagement. Can you live with that? He laughed, a joyful, relieved sound. I wouldn't want you any other way, my love. We'll set up the most secure home office the East Coast has ever seen. Your ambition is the very thing I fell for. He slid the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly, a symbol not of ownership but of commitment. The ultimate satisfaction, the ex's downfall. 2 days later, just before we left the estate, Julian received an important call from Clara. He put it on speaker for me. The outcome is complete, Mr. Rossi, Clara announced, her tone professional and cool. Garrett Vance was given the options: accept the charges for financial fraud and battery and resign from the firm, or face an open, public lawsuit involving the police and the firm's ethics committee. He chose the former. His resignation was effective this morning. He signed the non-disclosure, returned the stolen funds, and his access to the firm's resources has been completely terminated. He is financially, professionally, and reputationally ruined. He cannot come within 500 yards of Ms. Chen. The problem has been neutralized. I closed my eyes and let the wave of pure, absolute justice wash over me. It wasn't just that he was gone, it was that he was powerless. The satisfaction was total. Julian took the phone. "Excellent work, Clara, thank you." He hung up and looked at me, his eyes full of tenderness and triumph. "You'll never touch her again, Garrett," Julian murmured, not to me, but to the memory of the bully. I slipped my hand into his. "The best canceled flight of my life," I whispered, the relief making me dizzy with happiness. 6 months later, the sun streamed through the stained glass windows of a beautiful old private chapel in the city. I was wearing a simple, custom-made gown, elegant, understated, and completely mine. My bouquet was filled with white hydrangeas, Julian's favorite flower, a small, subtle nod to his world. I didn't have a huge wedding party, just a few close friends I'd made since moving to the city, and Julian's family, who had welcomed me with the fierce, protective loyalty that defined the Rossi clan. As I walked down the aisle toward Julian, who was waiting at the altar, impeccably tailored, I thought about the intervening 6 months. I had taken the Seattle job, working remotely from a stunning home office Julian had insisted on building for me. I'd proven my worth, secured my promotion, and most importantly, I had kept my promise to myself. I was a success entirely independent of my husband's power. Julian had honored every single part of our contract, never once questioning my decisions or my schedule. I reached the altar. Julian took my hand, his grip warm and steady. In his eyes, I didn't see a rescuer or a boss. I saw a true partner, a man who respected my ambition as much as he loved my heart. "You look breathtaking, Mrs. Rossi to be," he whispered. "You look complete," I whispered back. The ceremony was short, powerful, and deeply personal. When the minister announced, "You may kiss the bride," Julian kissed me with the passion of a man who had finally found his missing piece, and the deep respect of a man who knew he had found his equal. As we walked back down the aisle, I realized I had left the chapel a completely different woman than the one who had nearly collapsed on the airport floor. I was Mrs. Julian Rossi, but more importantly, I was Maya Chen, the woman who chose her own power. We reached the entrance and paused, the joy of the crowd surrounding us. Max, now smiling, a rare and unnerving sight, opened the car door for us. For a moment I glanced toward the street, a final necessary look back. I saw a figure standing far in the shadows across the street, near a dark, unmarked car, Garrett Vance. He was watching. His expression was a perfect, agonizing portrait of disbelief, fury, and absolute impotence. He hadn't been able to stay away, but he was forced to keep his distance, a defeated ghost tethered to his own humiliation. Julian's hand tightened firmly, possessively, on my waist, pulling me close. He hadn't needed to look. He knew. "He's nothing now, amore," Julian murmured into my ear, using the Italian term for love. "You are safe. Forever. You are mine to love and mine to protect. That is the only truth that matters." We stepped into the car. As the tinted windows rolled up, sealing us away into the quiet luxury of our new life, I looked at my husband, the emerald-cut diamond flashing in the light. "No regrets?" Julian asked, reading my final thought. I laughed, leaning into his strength, feeling the peace of final, utter closure. "None at all. The best decision I ever made was choosing the danger of your honesty over the safety of his lies." The car pulled away, leaving the shadow of Garrett Vance and the humiliation of that airport terminal far behind. The journey had started with a public display of violence, but it ended with a private, powerful union built on respect, redemption, and absolute justice. And that was a story worth sharing. If there's one profound truth Maya's journey teaches us, it's this. The greatest danger is not the external threat you see, but the internal one you accept. For years, Maya lived under the safety of Garrett's control, sacrificing her identity and her self-worth for the illusion of stability. It took a devastating public humiliation at the airport, a scene that mirrored her quiet, private destruction, to force her hand. The lesson here is deeply universal. You are never too old, too settled, or too indebted to demand justice and claim your own authority. Her ultimate victory wasn't just marrying Julian. It was the quiet, powerful choice to complete her career goal first, proving that her self-worth was the greatest asset she possessed. She chose the honest risk of Julian's dangerous world over the predictable toxicity of Garrett's lies. The moment you recognize the toxic safety you've accepted, you gain the power to choose radical, terrifying freedom. This story is a powerful reminder that healing begins when you start fighting for yourself, not running away. We all have a Garrett in our lives, a job, a relationship, or even a deeply held insecurity that holds us captive. It takes immense courage to walk away from that familiar weight, but on the other side of fear, your Julian Rossi moment, your moment of absolute, non-negotiable protection and partnership, is waiting. You deserve respect, clarity, and a life where your choices are celebrated, not questioned. If Maya's story resonated with you, if you've ever had to choose between fear and freedom, or if you simply believe that everyone deserves justice and a passionate, respectful partner, please do me a favor. Hit that like button to affirm that choice, and subscribe to our channel. By joining our community, you're helping us share more stories that prove that strength, dignity, and a beautiful new beginning are always within reach. Stay strong, stay brave, and never, ever settle for less than what you deserve. Until next time, take care.